Known universally as the most haunted house in all Ireland, Leap Castle was once the principal seat of the powerful and warlike O'Carrolls, princes of Ely. It stands on a vast ancient rock, guarding a strategic pass through the wild Slieve-Bloom Mountains. And on my first visit, I can distinctly remember my initial feelings of fear and fascination. Nowhere before had ever held so many suggestions of the supernatural. The O'Carrolls were the last clan to surrender to the British in the 17th century, and their fearsome reputation has left behind a legacy of intrigue and murder. Local people are still in awe of the castle and are fearful of the many ghosts that haunt it. Above the main hall of the great 14th century tower is what is known as the Bloody Chapel, where one-eyed Tig O'Carroll slew his brother at the altar, and late at night, passers-by on the main road have seen a window of the room suddenly illuminated by a strange light. In one corner of this chamber was a spiked oubliette, a secret dungeon into which unsuspecting prisoners were thrown down through a trapdoor and conveniently forgotten. 3 cartloads of bones were extracted from here after the house was destroyed by fire in 1922. Below the keep, a network of deep dungeons were hewn into the rock, containing bricked-up passages and secret chambers. Several human skeletons were found here too. The last owners of the castle, before it was burnt by the IRA, were the Anglo-Irish Derby family, who obtained the estate when Jonathan Derby married the daughter of an O'Carroll chieftain in the 17th century. A staunch royalist, he was known as the Wild Captain, and is said to have hidden a fabulous hoard of treasure in the castle with the help of 2 servants, who he then murdered, before he himself was falsely imprisoned for treason. When he was released many years later, his mind was so deranged that he couldn't remember where he'd hidden the chest, and his insane ghost is still said to be searching for it. During the period of the Derby's residence, overnight guests frequently experienced the terrifying spectre of a tall female figure, dressed in what seemed to be a red gown, with her right hand raised menacingly above her head, seemingly illumined from within. The unfortunate visitor always awoke suddenly in the middle of the night prior to this nightmarish vision, with an extraordinary and violent cold feeling in the region of their heart. The strangest and most demonic spectre is a foul-smelling elemental, half human, half beast, that haunts the tower stair, and is believed to be the embodiment of all the horrific and evil deeds that have taken place here. The present owner is the accomplished musician Sean Ryan, who is seeking to rid the castle of these nightmarish spectres.
We first heard from a friend of ours, Lady Ross in Castle, and she asked me at a party one night would I be interested in buying a castle in the Slieve-Bloom Mountains with a galvanised roof on it. And of course, the immediate response was no, thank you. And, but she persisted and eventually persuaded me to come and look at it. So we arrived of a very, very wet morning to see it, and we saw it at its worst, but we fell in love with it and decided possibly we could, take it on and do something with it. 2 of the spirits we experience at the moment are little girls, 2 little girls who lived here in the early 1600s. Emily would be about 11 or 12, I'd say, and Charlotte younger, about 6 or 7. And they play around the hall. Charlotte has a very badly deformed right leg. It's almost completely turned backwards. And she hobbles around after Emily calling her name. Now, we know Emily fell off the top of the castle, off the southeast corner of the castle. And quite a lot of people who come in actually see her fall and see the rope ladder effect while she had to climb up onto the gable battlements. They probably went up playing there and shouldn't have, and she fell. Now, occasionally with them then there's a governess or a nanny. The funny thing about her is she makes herself known more to visitors than to us. And I think myself she's the one sad spirit in the house I would like to pass on. She's trying to get a message over. Two elder ladies were at the door, and they were from the Western Cherokee Nation in America. And they were over here tracing roots because seemingly at the end of the 1700s, early 1800s, a lot of Irish men married into the Cherokee Nation. So they were over, and so in their compound names you get a lot of Irish surnames, and they were looking to trace relations and all that. But the minute they came inside the door, they actually, both of them went on their knees because they saw the two little girls that we see regularly here, Charlotte and Emily. They saw them playing around. We went up to the chapel then. They found it very hard up there. They found the energy just too much, and the heart was pumping up there. And the nearer they went to the oubliette, the worse it got for them. They told us that the spirits were huddling in corners up there because they were afraid of the work we were doing. And they seemed to think that they thought that it was going back to a bad regime where they probably lost their lives suddenly here. And they were quite afraid of it all. So we reassured them that that's not the way, through the American ladies, that's not the way things were going to be in the future. In the north wing, there's a house called the Priest House. And in very early times, it's a Tudor house, but in early times, it housed a priest in the castle complex. But later, when the Anglo-Irish lived here and the Darbys lived here, it became the nursery for the children. The children were actually brought up in that. But we hear my name called a lot from that part of the house. Now, it's a total ruin at the minute. And the other thing we hear is a chant like a plain chant coming from there. Now, we tend to hear that mostly in the summertime, but I think that's because we use the green in the summer a lot. We sit out there, whereas in the winter you wouldn't be out there, so you wouldn't get the opportunity to hear it.
I believe that timeless spirits and primordial powers still haunt many of Ireland's great houses and castles. For me, these buildings are symbols of a vast stillness, a silence more powerful and lasting than man, a universal subconscious, a mystical and spiritual solitude. Their ivy-clad windows, soaring towers and crumbling walls